item 4, entitled Securing of Additional Investments and Relations with Financial Mechanisms, and its sub-item A, entitled Report by the Global Environment Facility on the Financing of Programs and Projects Concerning Desertification, Land Degradation, and Drought. I will give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat to introduce the official documentation under this sub-item, and then to the representative of the Global Environment Facility to present the report. I now give the floor to Mr. Melchiade Bukuru to introduce the following documents. Report by the Global Environment Facility on the Financing of Programs and Projects Concerning Desertification, Land Degradation, and Drought, contained in document ICCD Cric 20/4, and draft decisions for consideration at the 20th session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, contained in document ICCD/Cric 20/10. Mr. Bukuru, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce before this committee documents ICCD/Cric 20/4 and ICCD Cric 20/10. Parties may recall that in Decision 9 COP14, the COP invited the GF to continue its support for countries in programming GF land degradation focal area resources to combat desertification, land degradation, and drought, and achieve their voluntary land degradation neutrality targets, including in the context of land degradation neutrality, transformative projects and programs. It also invited the GF to continue supporting parties to meet their reporting obligations under the Convention and encouraged the GEF to provide adequate financial resources in a timely manner and to support, within its mandate, the implementation of the relevant aspects of national drought plans and other drought-related activities within the scope of the Convention. This document contains the report by the GF, reproduced as submitted without further editing for review by the Cric, and to inform any draft decision of the Cric may submit for consideration by the COP. Document ICCD Cric 20/10 that is also introduced in this note contains draft decisions for consideration at the 20th session of the Cric, and the Cric will be invited to review the report submitted by the GEF and to make any recommendations it may wish to forward to the COP for further action. I wish to thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank Mr. Bukuru for his statement. I will now give the floor to the representative of the Global Environment Facility, Mr. Ulrich Appel. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present the report of the Global Environment Facility to the 15th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. The report covers the period from July 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2021, coinciding with the second, third, and part of the final year of the 7th GEF replenishment phase. The report also includes cumulative achievements in GEF 7, which will close next month on June 30th, 2022. The report confirms the substantial progress made in addressing decisions taken at UNCCD COP14 on collaboration with the GEF. To this end, I would like to highlight programming trends, how the GEF has addressed COP decisions of relevance, and expected portfolio results. Let me start with a summary of the achievements. In the last 2.5 years covered by the report, 99 projects and programs were approved with funding from the GEF Land Degradation Focal Area and other related funding windows of the GEF Trust Fund. The total GEF grant for these projects and programs amounts to $715 million, which leveraged $5.2 billion in co-financing, representing a ratio of 1:7. These resources were utilized by countries through 30 standalone land degradation focal area projects with $84 million of focal area resources and 69 multifocal area projects and programs with in total $630 million of GEF resources. Regarding programming, these 99 projects and programs include 87 national projects in 67 countries across all 5 UNCCD regions. Furthermore, 12 global projects and programs, including the GEF 7 impact programs on food systems and on sustainable cities, were joined by 13 additional countries. Regarding enabling activities, 102 countries applied for reporting support under the Convention by December 2021, as reported. But I would like to provide you with an update that as of today, we have been able to support 122 countries included in 6 umbrella projects that were approved just before the start of the COP. A key focus of GEF programming continues to be on land degradation neutrality. In the reporting period, the GEF financed the implementation of voluntary LDN targets in 22 countries. The GEF also continued to support the technical assistance facility of the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund with the objective to provide technical assistance to build a strong portfolio of projects for the LDN fund. In response to COP14 decisions that invite the GEF within its mandate to support the implementation of relevant aspects of the national drought plans and other drought-related activities within the scope of the Convention, the GEF Secretariat provided countries with options for addressing drought through the land degradation focal area, and in particular through the Dryland Sustainable Landscape Impact Program. Support was also provided through other funding windows, including multi-trust fund projects with the Least Developed Countries Fund. Further, an enabling activities project has facilitated parties' active participation in the Intergovernmental Working Group on Drought. In terms of expected results, GEF's land degradation portfolio continues to make significant progress towards GEF 7 corporate targets for the global environmental benefits. For example, the portfolio has exceeded the target for area of land restored and is expected to reach 8 million hectares of restoration. The target of area of landscapes under improved practices has so far achieved 52% of the target. This is mainly due to countries prioritizing restoration activities. Contributions to this target are expected to increase by the end of GEF 7. With regard to project beneficiaries, 74 million people, including 36 million women and 38 million men, will directly benefit from land degradation focal area projects and programs. Continuing our reflections, I'm pleased to inform you that we are on track to program 100% of the land degradation focal area resources by the end of the GEF 7 period. Of the total $475 million that were allocated to the land degradation focal area in GEF 7, $445 million were programmed by December 31st, 2021. This represents a utilization percentage of 94% of the resource envelope as of December 2021. Finally, I would like to share the great outcome of the replenishment discussions for the JEF 8 period of July 2022 to June 2026, which resulted in a record pledge of $5.25 billion. More than $600 million will be allocated to the land degradation focal area, which is a 26% increase compared to JEF 7. In conjunction with the funding for integrated programs that address food systems, restoration, forests, and nature-based solutions, JEF is looking forward to being a partner of choice for parties to implement the UNCCD agenda in the years ahead. In closing, allow me to express our continued commitment to utilize the lessons from our projects and programs and the outcomes of this COP in the JEF 8 period. We look forward to productive discussions. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative of the Global Environment Facility for his statement. Are there any delegates wishing to make a statement in connection with the report of the Global Environment Facility that was just introduced? At this point, I've been asked by our IT staff to remind delegates to use the microphone that has been assigned to the nameplate. The microphones are connected with our screen, and I have to go by the register of requests on the screen. In this regard, I recognize the delegate of China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you. 中方感谢 JEF 落实公约相关决议，以实际行动和项目支持各国土地退化防治实践。考虑到在很多国家参与 JEF 项目的部门并不是公约国家联络员单位。
Chair, we have a technical hitch. Could the speaker please be asked to start again, please? Thank you.
Okay. China thanks JEF for implementing relevant resolutions of the Convention to support land degradation prevention and control in various countries with practical actions and projects. Considering in many countries, the agency involved in JEF are not treaties' national focal points, we suggest that JEF can work closely with Secretariat and regularly inform the treaty focal points about JEF national projects on land degradation in the field through the Secretariat so that national focal points can get relevant information and better liaison and coordinate.
I thank the distinguished delegate of China, and I now give the floor to the European Union. European Union, you have the floor.
Sorry, I have some troubles with my speech. Maybe if I can have the floor after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. I now recognize the delegate from the Republic of Syria. Syria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Syrian Arab Republic attaches a great deal of importance to the JEF activities. Indeed, Syria is now recovering from the war, and therefore we focus on environmental projects. We start with new projects as well. As of 2012, we haven't received any financial assistance from the JEF. Some projects are pending support, and we do wish to receive some financial support from GEF once we have submitted our report on desertification for the year 2021. We have numerous projects which are waiting financial assistance. We have a number of activities related to LDN in order to achieve sustainable development goals, particularly 15.3 target. We do need support in order to fight against drought. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Syria. I'm not sure if the EU's microphone has been fixed. If it has, I give the floor to the European Union.
Votre Excellence, Monsieur le Président.
Your Excellency, Chair, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege of making this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The European Union and its member states commend the work undertaken by the GEF and welcomes the major support provided by the GEF for capacity building in states parties in order that they can implement the convention and respect their obligations. And we call for extra efforts to incorporate the GEF in the implementation of national desertification plans of parties in order to strengthen the existing framework for combating desertification and drought, and therefore the need to develop new tools. We restate the importance of combating land degradation as a key factor in synergy in integrated management. We encourage synergy between the GEF and the Rio Conventions by encouraging cooperation between national focal points vis-à-vis the GEF and the different Rio Conventions, as well as the 2030 Sustainable Agenda, especially Target 15.3. And we support the commitment of the GEF to supporting the Great Green Wall Initiative for the Sahara and Sahel, and calls for strengthening of cooperation with the countries concerned. We call on the GEF to foster synergy with other financial mechanisms, such as the LDN Fund, and to contribute to attracting new donor resources by continuing to probe possibilities for the private sector to support the GEF, while also promoting innovative funding approaches. And the EU and its member states welcome the 8th replenishment of the GEF in the light of the ambitious objectives. And we feel that GEF 8 will have a key role to play in helping states better to target national financial flows in order to address the question of perverse incentives in the agricultural sector. And we also stress the essential role of GEF 8 in supporting a wide array of land management techniques, such as intensification and diversification, particularly agroecological versions thereof, and other approaches based on natural ecological processes to improve yields and to reduce agrochemical inputs. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the delegate of the European Union for his statement. I now recognize the delegate of Argentina. Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to the Secretariat and to the GEF for the report provided to the states parties at this Cric meeting. And I highlight the endeavours to bring about a 25% increase in the 8th replenishment of the GEF. That's definitely an important stride forward for the Convention, but we know that the difficulties in terms of combating desertification, drought and land degradation are going forward unchecked, and so forth we need financing and support from the GEF in order to be able to combat them. Reverting to GEF 7, on the basis of which the report of the representative of the GEF was predicated, the representation of Argentina is very honoured to have been able to use projects using funds to deal with land degradation and the opportunity to establish voluntary targets, national voluntary targets, in the light of what has been done by GEF7 in terms of having a portfolio of projects for the next 5 years so that we can move forward in that direction. Furthermore, I would like to ask the representative of GEF about who's been appointed by the facility for the LDN fund, and also on the question of drought. I'd like to know if there's the possibility of using the GEF, at the request of member states, of course, of states parties, to undertake a comprehensive project with similar conditions or arrangements to those of the umbrella project. Quite honestly, when we look at our national reports, we need to be able to carry this issue of drought forward because it affects us seriously. And it's not entirely clear to us in GEF 8, but perhaps this should be an activity, an enabling initiative, and I wonder whether it could be carried out. Thank you.
I thank the delegate from Argentina for his statement. I now recognize the delegate from Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Microphone, please.
Allô? Ah, d'accord, merci. Donc,
thank you. Well, I wish to make the statement of the African Regional Group on progress made in terms of funds mobilization. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, Senegal has the honor to take the speak on behalf of the African Group and to thank the Secretariat of the Convention for the work it has performed. The African Group welcomes the efforts made by the Convention Secretariat and all public financial partners in supporting states parties and our African continent in particular in combating land degradation. We'd also like to recall that the financial aspect is a crucial issue for implementation of the provisions of the Convention, especially for the countries of the African continent, and they have on several occasions therefore called for the need to address this aspect seriously and to seek to mobilize resources at the regional and national levels alike in order to carry out transformative projects which, if they're not implemented, will make it very difficult for us to achieve land degradation neutrality. And that is becoming ever more urgent. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, the 15th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UNCCT on land, life and legacy, moving from scarcity to prosperity, should be a catalyst for establishing the future which we are all duty-bound to bequeath to future generations. And this can only happen through the making available of the financial resources required to implement programs and initiatives launched under the auspices of the Convention, particularly on land degradation and drought. And this prompts the African Group to wonder legitimately and seriously whether the Convention really has a financial mechanism. From our standpoint, it seems to us that the current financial structure is not in step with the challenges to be faced and the urgency of the problems. The global mechanism is a fundraising initiative, but it's contingent 100% on voluntary contributions, and those resources are unpredictable, as is the time when they're going to be provided, which affects the whole process of programming. And the land degradation fund is independent of the Secretariat. It's just geared to the private sector and depends on loans and progress actually achieved. And it's clear to us that this fund cannot provide a great deal of value added in terms of fundraising. And the GEF is such that land degradation is not properly resourced and in a consistent fashion. In the light of this realization, the African Group calls for strengthening the mobilization of financial structures for land degradation neutrality. It calls for the implementation of a true strategy to increase funding, particularly through financial targets, and the establishment of a financial instrument which is dedicated to the convention, while also strengthening cooperation with the GEF in order to expand financial resources earmarked for dealing with land degradation, with strong support for UNCCT focal points in the distribution of funds. We also need to strengthen and formalize cooperation with the Green Climate Fund, and we should recall that the GEF, or the IPCC report, has shown that up to 30% of the Paris agreements can be met through this process. And we also call for strong involvement of the private initiative for the private sector for large-scale funding through operational measures. Thank you very much, Chair, for listening to me.
I thank the delegate from Senegal for his statement. I see no other requests for the floor. Are there any delegations that wish to make a statement? I recognize the distinguished delegate of India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I congratulate Jeff for mobilizing resources this time a bit higher than last two cycles of 6 and 7. Earlier it was just 4.1 billion now, and it has been stagnated at 4.34, 4.43, 4.1. And now I think in the Jeff 8 cycle, we are expecting that the resource mobilization will be about 5.25 billion. I think that is a quite reasonable resource mobilization. So that really a big congratulations to Jeff. But I have one issue, one point, that allocation of funds to the Rio Convention, Jeff has a treatment of preferential treatment to other Jeff convention like climate change and biodiversity. It is very, very high when compared to rain restoration. I think it must be made clear why it is so. You know, why land degradation, desertification and drought, which is the main issue. And as we see, the climate change, biodiversity, everything depends on land. If the resource allocation to land degradation compared to other Rio Convention is less, how you can expect the other two conventions of climate change and biodiversity could prosper without land? So that is a very important issue, which I think that it need to be deliberated, and that is the issue that we, in earlier Jeff 7 cycle, we strongly contested that this resource allocation should be uniformly without any preferential treatment. I think that should be done. So this is the point that we think that, and another issue is that Jeff has a implementing agency of the UN organizations. So UN organizations have a complete control on the funds on the project. There's not much control by the country parties. Why can't the fund be directly given to the country parties or to the national focal point from which they can take the project directly and get it implemented? So there's no person or organization in between. So it really affects the implementation of projects and transparency. I think that is very important for Jeff or these projects to be successful. The funds must be given directly to the country parties. That I feel so. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished delegate of India for his statement. Are there any other delegations that wish to make a statement? I see none. And so at this time, I would like to give the floor back to the Global Environment Facility to make a response to the comments that were raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, distinguished delegates, for the comments and questions. Let me respond to them briefly. First of all, I thank you for the acknowledgement provided of the work of the JEF and also of the JEF 8 replenishment. I would like to also note many valuable suggestions that that I take note of, and we will incorporate into our work in JEF 8. For example, the suggestion to improve the coordination between operational focal points and national focal points. This can be addressed within our new country support program in JEF 8, where we will try to achieve this, a better cooperation, and which is also included in the policy recommendations for the JEF 8 programming strategy. Also, allow me to respond to several interventions made that extra efforts are needed in the implementation of national drought plans and drought mitigation. As we have started in JEF 7 within our mandate to address issues related to the mitigation of drought, we will continue to do so. And in JEF 8, we have raised the mitigation of drought to the level of a focal area goal. So mitigation of drought is now included in the goal of the land degradation focal area in JEF 8. And there is a dedicated objective in the land degradation focal area strategy, objective 3, which will help countries to address DLDD issues, particularly in drylands, but not only in drylands if countries wish to do so. Let me also ensure you that we will continue our work on the Great Green Wall initiative together with all partners in the framework of the Great Green Wall Accelerator. We are working with many partners there together, including these suggestions made, better cooperation with the GCF and with other funds. This is done in the context of the Great Green Wall Accelerator. On some specific questions with JEF 8 and what is possible in JEF 8, I would like to say that the JEF 8 will start exactly on the 1st of July. On the 1st of July this year, then also the star allocations will be released to all countries. And then we will start engaging with all countries to discuss the details of the programming and making sure that all countries can reflect their priorities through the programming. And we will discuss this in more detail than through our country support program. On the point from the distinguished delegate from India, I would like to remind you that the allocation, when we say the GEF land degradation focal area will have an allocation of more than 600 million, this is a notional allocation, but there is a high flexibility. Countries are flexible to use allocation from the biodiversity focal area or the climate change focal area also for land degradation projects and programs. So there is a flexibility if a country would like to do more on land degradation than the available allocation. There can be a marginal adjustment by taking funding from the other focal areas towards land degradation, and I wanted to inform you that has actually happened in GEF 7. We have programmed more than the start allocation that was available, actually 103%, which shows that 3% more was allocated to the land degradation focal area, utilized by the land degradation focal area than allocated. And finally, also for the point of India with the implementing agencies, we have 18 accredited GEF agencies, and they fulfill very important roles in our project cycle, but they are only for implementing. We fully adhere to the principle of country ownership. We would like countries to take full ownership of the execution of the projects. The implementing agency, they only receive a very small fee for their services, but all the majority of the available funding should go to the countries, is going to the countries for the implementation and the execution of the projects on the ground. So, but we will of course work with all of you together in GEF 8 to further enhance this principle of country ownership, so that your priorities are fully addressed. I think I have covered most of the very valuable suggestions and comments, so let me stop here. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished speaker from the Global Environmental Facility. And with that, we have now concluded the general discussion of sub-item 4A. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to turn to sub-item B, entitled Report by the Global Mechanism on Progress Made in the Mobilization of Resources for the Implementation of the Convention. I now give the floor to the Managing Director of the Global Mechanism, Ms. Louise Baker, to introduce the following documents. Report by the Global Mechanism on Progress Made in the Mobilization of Resources for the Implementation of the Convention, contained in document ICCD/Cric20/5, and draft decisions for consideration at the 20th session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, contained in ICCD/Cric20/10. Madam, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, at its 14th session, the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification requested the global mechanism of the UNCCD to report at the 15th session of the COP on the implementation of Decision 13, COP14, on the assessment of financial flows for the implementation of the Convention. That decision requested the GM to continue to support the mobilization of funding from all sources in support of the implementation of the Convention, and, in that regard, to continue strengthening and establishing new partnerships with relevant institutions. The GM has also been involved in coordination with the Secretariat in the implementation of other decisions taken at COP14, including, but not limited to, Decision 6/COP14 on promoting greater participation of the private sector, Decision 9/COP14 on collaboration with the Global Environment Facility, Decision 11, COP14, on developing a more integrated financial monitoring framework. Decision 12, COP14, on supporting developing country parties in the implementation of the Convention through capacity building, financing, and voluntary technology transfer. Decision 23, COP14, on identifying potential and innovative financing instruments for addressing drought. And Decision 25, COP14, on the development of financing options related to anthropogenic sand and dust storms, SDS, source mitigation. In this context, I'm very pleased to introduce document ICCD/Cric 20/5, which reports on the main activities undertaken by the GM during the 2020 to 2021 biennium, and concludes with recommendations for the consideration of the parties at COP15. In accordance with Decision 32, COP14, the draft decision relevant to this agenda item is contained in pages 4 and 5 of document ICCD/Cric 20/10. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Baker for her statement. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with the report by the global mechanism that was just introduced? I recognize the delegate from China. China, you have the floor.
China acknowledges the series of working modalities and achievements after GM has changed its working methodology and hopes that GM can provide specific information on the amount of funding assisted parties receive and project distribution so that parties can gain more clarity and transparency on GM's performance. China has noticed that in the financing paragraph of the resolution, there are expressions such as other countries with conditions, which seriously confuses the nature and responsibility of developed and developing countries in terms of funding, and has negative impact on other international conventions. And these phrases should be deleted. Thank you.
I thank the delegate from China for her statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the European Union. European Union, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair, ladies and gentlemen, co-chairs, delegates. I have the honor of offering this statement on behalf of the EU and its member states. The EU and its member states hail the efforts from the GEF and the progress made in the mobilization of resources for the implementation of the Convention for 2020, 2021, 2022. We greatly support the stress of the implementation on land degradation neutrality and the goal of SDG 15.3. This has been essential for the implementation of the convention. We also support and hail the commitment of the private sector. COP15 is an opportunity to increasingly include the private sector in our conversations. We also recognize the business forum and the high-level segment that took place at the beginning of this COP. The EU and its member states hail the work undertaken by the GEF as regards drought, and in particular the identification of new financing mechanisms to fight against this phenomenon. We also would like to ensure that the work undertaken by Secretariat and the GEF on drought management is targeted and complementary to the existing work underway. And in particular, we encourage a review of funds available for capacity building and national plans to fight against drought and concrete actions to include also land degradation neutrality. EU and its member states would like to ask the Secretariat of the meaning and the implications of the paradigm changes tied to drought management, point F of the decision. In a general sense, we greatly support the partnerships and cooperation, and we would like to hail the work of the GEF in its partnership in preparing drafts. We encourage the GEF to ensure that these initiatives contribute to the ongoing incorporation of all initiatives on land degradation neutrality through work on the ground. The EU and its member states greatly support the strengthening of partnerships to resolve the backlog in projects and to support land management and drought resistance. Lastly, we would like to encourage the parties to cooperate between different sectors, to using consistent use of data and tools, land monitoring in the decision-making progress and in policy-making, as well as in its work with disaster risk management in the Rio framework and sustainable development. We would like to we support the group and nurse observation land degradation neutrality to support the parties through the initiative for land degradation neutrality. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the delegate from the European Union for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of Bangladesh government and on my own behalf, please accept my warm appreciation and thanks. Mr. Chair, we need forward planning and investment in the protection, sustainable management of land with a view to ensuring just and sustainable economic transition capable to resist adverse impact of climate change, combat desertification, land degradation, drought, and to protect and preserve environment and biodiversity. We should work together so that evolving and shifting patterns of production and consumption cannot further drive land degradation, rather benefit people and planet for prosperity and peace. In spite of optimistic claims of plentiful productive land, there is repeated land degradation and use of fertile land for building activities. By increasing yield productivity, this aim may be achieved, but it could exert higher pressure on prevailing natural resources. Mr. Chair, land restoration provides multiple potential benefits and thus draws interest from various stakeholders. Over the past years, attention to and ambitions for restoration have gained momentum. Mr. Chair, the government of Bangladesh has prepared and assessed land degradation scenario, national land use map, and agroecological map for the country. The government has also formulated a number of policies to combat land degradation, tackle climate change, and to protect and preserve environment and biodiversity. Distinguished delegates, natural resource management is very vital for agrarian Bangladesh. We need huge on-farm and off-farm capacity building. We need to intensify research and development in developing countries like Bangladesh regarding climate change, land degradation, and scaling up of SLM technologies. We need fast-track resource mobilization towards implementation of ecosystem-based approaches and nature-based solutions, including technology transfer, knowledge sharing, training, etc. Distinguished delegates, research suggests that future agricultural land use depends enormously on efficiency increase. Over the past few years, the substantial contribution to the increase in food production has come from efficiency increase in agriculture. In both yields and conversion steps in the livestock sectors, we need sustainable land use. At the same time, we need sustainable production and consumption pattern. Mr. Chair, with its scarce resources, Bangladesh is trying to implement sustainable land use, sustainable production, and consumption patterns. At the same time, Bangladesh is encouraging and welcoming strong and effective global cooperation and support. Mr. Chair, thank you.
I thank the delegate from Bangladesh for his statement. I now recognize the delegate from Cuba. Cuba, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, Chair. And thank you very much for giving us the floor, and thank you also for the presentations on such a vital items as is the mobilization of financial resources for ensuring the successful efforts of our countries in land degradation neutrality and comprehensive management of drought. Chair, the challenges are significant as we have faced the results of COVID. This has led to great impact on lives and our economies. Science has reaffirmed that we need to find innovative solutions for the recovery of our economies in a sustainable manner, in a manner that is inclusive and equitable. Just to offer one example, Cuba, in the first year of the pandemic, spent more than $1.5 billion pesos on measures to tackle COVID-19. without including the multi-million budget that involved the development in our 5 vaccinations. We did so with our own resources. Also, during that period, as an equal priority, many millions were allocated to the protection and recovery of soils in a time of great financial restrictions, the idea being to ensure food security and agricultural production for our populations. Given these difficult realities, we back the work of the convention, the GEF, and we urge ongoing provision of adequate resources for our countries. We call for greater operability in the financing for meeting land degradation neutrality measures and in tackling drought. We also believe that it's important that we see ongoing strengthening and capacity building for our countries to access additional funds and financing, as well as instruments that can be applicable locally and nationally to mobilize more economic resources with an eye on recovery of degraded lands and a recovery of our agricultural productive systems. I would like to conclude by recalling the words of Commander Fidel Castro at the Earth Summit. And he said, if we want to save humanity from its self-destruction, we must better distribute wealth and technology around the world. Less luxury, less squandering, and for less poverty and less hunger around the world. There should not be more transfers of consumption patterns and lifestyles from the north to the south. We must have a fair economic system. We must use science for sustainable development without pollution. The environmental debt should be paid, not the foreign debt. We should see the disappearance of hunger and not of mankind. Thank you very much.
I thank the delegate of Cuba for his statement. I see a request from an observer, but before I give the floor to observers, are there any other delegations that wish to take the floor at this time? If not, I close the list of delegations and I give the floor to the observer. I see U39. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Since this is the first time the CBD is taking the floor in this plenary, I would like to thank the government of Côte d'Ivoire for organizing the COP in these very challenging circumstances, and the UNCCD Secretariat for the excellent arrangements provided to the delegates. Distinguished delegates, the CBD Secretariat highly appreciates the assistance provided by the UNCCD Secretariat and the UNCCD parties in supporting the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework through the Bern process. The future biodiversity framework, which will have its next round of negotiation in June this year in Nairobi, underpins the importance of healthy and diverse terrestrial habitats. In Nairobi, governments will discuss the ambition of action targets on integrated biodiversity-inclusive spatial planning, restoration of degraded terrestrial ecosystems, and targets on establishing well-connected systems of protected areas. The roles and inputs of Indigenous peoples and local communities, gender, and youth are critical to the negotiations. Once the biodiversity framework is adopted, governments will review national biodiversity strategies and their action plans to reflect new national targets, baselines, monitoring frameworks, and financial plans required for mainstreaming biodiversity across all sectors. We congratulate the global mechanism on the results achieved during the first phase of the LDN target setting program, which resulted in 106 national restoration targets, as well as on the rolling out of the second phase of the LDN TSP. We look forward to enhancing synergies in the second phase of this program. The CBD Secretariat also appreciates the progress in the development of gender-responsive projects, 20 of which have biodiversity benefits. We also pay utmost attention to the launch of the Project Preparation Partnership which will further build countries' capacity to access financial resources. The financing of the biodiversity framework is of crucial importance to achieving the vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. Dear delegates, based on the above, we would like to encourage you to connect and inform CBD focal point colleagues about the outcomes achieved in setting up LDN targets in your countries, including progress on the development of gender-responsive projects and the project preparation partnership to be launched at this COP. This will help your countries to design more ambitious national biodiversity strategies and action plans and facilitate data and information flow for monitoring and reporting on the nature-positive agendas of your governments, including the Sustainable Development Goals and actions towards the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative of the CBD for her statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate of Venezuela. Venezuela, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, members of the lead table, Chair. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela underscores the promotion of all of the instruments for addressing drought and the organization of capacity building on their use. However, we note with concern that the new report from the IPCC shows that climate change has brought an increase in severity and frequency of drought. In our country, we have seen the direct impact of this with a drop of productivity in forests and pastures. This has affected our reservoirs with lower water levels. This has increased vulnerability to desertification and the risks of land degradation. It has also caused damage to our forests and ecosystems. We think it thus important to call upon the support of the GEF and the global mechanism so that they can direct the most possible resources to programs and projects that allow for exchange of information as well as capacity building on the national level for land management, monitoring systems, early warning systems, and measures to address drought. Further, this should be aimed at holding webinars so that those interested can become aware of the instruments available to tackle drought. We recommend that the Cric considers including in future additional investments the support of a knowledge-sharing network and capacity-building network as regards the drought preparation or preparedness efforts. Thank you very much.
I thank the delegate from Venezuela for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the Republic of Korea. Korea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Republic of Korea. Since 2012, the Korea government has supported the development and testing of ADN through the Changwon Initiative. The Changwon Initiative has led the report to develop ADN target setting program and ADN transformative project and programming. ADN TSP and ADN TPP are two of the premier activities supported by the Changwon Initiative. They aim to help countries set ADN target and support implementation on the ground. To date, over 120 countries have committed to set ADN target. As I understand it, Global Mechanism is launching this project preparation partnership to scale up and further advance implementation. I sincerely hope that this new partnership will further enhance the implementation of ADN at the national, regional, and global level. Thank you for attention.
I thank the representative of Korea for his statement. I see no further requests for the floor. And in this case, I will now give the floor to the Global Mechanism to respond to the comments that were received. The Global Mechanism, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, distinguished delegates. I'll do my best. I would like perhaps some clarity from the Honourable Delegate from China about the specificities of the question, but just to say, in fact, I think what we've been focusing on this last couple of years is really stacking the pipeline of projects. So there's money being implemented, and then there's the number of projects and proposals that are being worked on. For example, we have got 3 projects under implementation, 3 project documents approved and pending implementation, 3 project documents submitted, 1 project document under development, 12 concept notes developed but funding not yet secured, 9 concept notes under development currently. So this is the kind of the current pipeline. The challenge of kind of documenting exactly is that the pipeline for accessing resources is very different per donor agency and can take quite a long period of time. So I'm happy to discuss further with you, and if we can answer your question more specifically, I would be delighted to do that. On the question around drought and capacity building, I think this is something that we recognize as incredibly important to many parties. There will be, or there is an enabling activities project under GEF that's being implemented with FAO on drought, and we're very conscious that in the context of stacking the pipeline of viable projects that we can take to donors, that we make sure that those are focused on your drought needs as well. So if that's the project that you need to get implemented or your priority, we are happy to work on that. You've heard mentioned here the partnership for project preparation. This is our innovation in the way that we work, in that we found that we have a lot of committed partners who will work with us and have real expertise that's complementary to ours to help the parties achieve their funding requests and walk through the process with us. So if you have, for example, on issues related to drought, we have an emerging partnership with the Global Water Partnership, on renewable energy with IRENA, so we can find a complementary partner to work with and help ease the process of proposal writing and project development. I want to touch just briefly on the comments from Bangladesh about the private sector. We see private sector as a really important part of diversification and new funding opportunities. It requires, I think, both an idea around incentives to incentivize the private sector to invest in this sector and to de-risk their investments on the one side as a financing stream, and on the other side really the private sector as a driver of either sustainable land management or land degradation. So really looking at consumption and production patterns as our sort of 2 inputs there. I want around kind of the interventions from Cuba and Bolivia and Venezuela. I think we're very much on the same lines in the sense that we want to see projects being developed that are multi-sectoral, that help the agricultural sector as well as the nature rebound, and the water management and the drought resilience mainstreamed into those projects. So well noted, and we will absolutely take note of that and move forward in that way. Bolivia also mentioned capacity building and the need for webinars, etc. Well noted. We are increasingly looking at capacity building to help the parties mobilize resources. What we found is that parties have got different focal points at national level for accessing the different sources of funding, so trying to do some capacity building training for national focal points and others within the government so they can more easily access the resources that are available. And coming back to both the point from Korea and from the CBD, that yes, we envisage this partnership for project preparation as a way of ensuring that we're quite small in the GM, but hopefully the Partnership for Project Preparation means that we can collaborate with partners that have got extra capacity, that want to see this convention implemented, that want to see the key elements of LDN, conservation, sustainable land management, restoration, really happening on the ground. So it's very much our ambition, and I hope it's a shared ambition for the parties, that we are able to implement LDN through a really vibrant pipeline of projects that will emerge. I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Allow me to thank the Global Mechanism for your responses to the comments and to delegations for your statements. Delegates, we have thus concluded the general discussion on Agenda Item 4, entitled Securing of Additional Investments and Relations with Financial Mechanisms. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 5, entitled Procedural Matters, Program of Work for the 21st session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention. I will now give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat, Ms. Anya Thust, to introduce the following document. Draft decisions for consideration at the 20th session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, contained in document ICCD Cric 20/10. Ms. Thust, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and distinguished delegates. I would like to remind delegates that in document ICCD Cric 20/10, there is a draft decision for consultation entitled Program of Work for the 21st session of the Cric on page 10 and bearing the number 5. This draft decision represents a standard agenda of an intersessional session of the committee and is based on the review of national reports to be submitted by parties as part of the 2022 UNCCD reporting process. The following agenda items are proposed in the draft decision. Inputs from regional meetings in preparation for the 21st session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, implementation of the Convention using the progress indicators contained in the 2018-2030 strategic framework of the UNCCD, and new indicators tested in the 2022 United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification reporting process. Implementation of voluntary land degradation neutrality targets and related implementation efforts, financial flows for the implementation of the Convention, procedures for the communication of information as well as the quality and formats of reports to be submitted to the Conference of the Parties, exchange of information through interactive dialogues on actions on the ground related to the implementation of sustainable land management practices, restoration and rehabilitation practices that assist with the recovery of ecosystem functions and services, the promotion of alternative livelihoods, and the establishment of systems for sharing information and knowledge on best practices and approaches to drought management. And finally, follow up on policy frameworks and thematic issues, sand and dust storm, land tenure, gender and drought. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Ms. Thust for her statement. Are there any delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with the document that was just introduced? I see no request for the floor. Distinguished delegates, we have thus concluded our program of work for this afternoon. The committee will reconvene tomorrow. Excuse me. Distinguished delegates, the committee will reconvene tomorrow, 18th of May, at 5 p.m. in order to consider Agenda Item 6 entitled Adoption of the Report of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, followed by Agenda Item 1, Sub-Item B, entitled Election of Officers Other than the Chair of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention. This meeting is now adjourned. Yeah. At this point, the Secretariat will make an announcement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And in light of the time that we have saved in the plenary, we would like to invite the delegations participating in the Cric contact group to move to room number 6, so that we possibly could, start our deliberations. You have the US.
That's the United States. I recognize the delegate of the United States.
Thank you, Chair. The United States welcomes the proposal to move immediately into contact groups. We would simply like to ask, given the fact that it often takes delegations a bit of time to get there, if we might establish a time at which we would actually start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think if we gave 15 minutes, around 15 minutes, we have 16:45. We would meet in room number 6 at 16:45. Thank you.